Sculpted by the tireless forces of wind, water and sun, Oman is a treasure trove of natural beauty. From coral reefs to mountains of sand, narrow canyons to endless plains, this desert realm enchants every traveler. 5 weeks, 8,000 kilometers and innumerable adventures. This is the Grand Omani Roadtrip. This travel documentary was produced in collaboration with iDrive 4x4 and Maha Rent a Car. Our road trip through Oman started by picking up our vehicle at the airport. With the paperwork out of the way, we were introduced to our four-wheeled companion. As we intended to explore all corners of the country, a reliable Land Cruiser was just what we needed. Before we could test the car's off-road capabilities though, we had to navigate the morning traffic in Muscat. Oman's capital is a bustling modern city. Nonetheless, there are still traces of its history. By far the most splendid building in Muscat is the Sultan Qaboos Grand Mosque. This house of worship is a delight in white. The interior of the building is just as astonishing. Our favorite site of the capital area lay 16 kilometers offshore though. The Dimaniyat Islands are an archipelago of 9 rocky outcrops surrounded by crystal clear waters. This nature reserve is free from human habitation, which allows both flora and fauna to flourish. But the real magic happens below the surface. As soon as we had dipped our heads in the water, we came upon a plethora of life. Especially noteworthy were the corals that grew abundantly on the rocky seafloor. These reefs do not only protect the beaches from erosion, but also provide a habitat for countless species. Particularly interesting to watch were the different species of parrotfish. These animals feed mainly on algae, but some subspecies also have a penchant for corals. Fascinatingly, once the coral fragments have passed through their guts, they will be excreted as sand. Whilst all the fish and coral were truly mesmerizing, our main reason for coming here was another. Green sea turtles can often be observed on the coral reefs that fringe the islands. For us, it was a dream come true to watch these living fossils glide effortlessly through the water. set out on our first off-road adventure. Embraced by the solitude of a wadi, we soaked in the raw charm of the arid landscape. In Oman, as elsewhere around the Arab world, the term wadi refers to a river valley. Most of these only flood after heavy downpours, but some are fed by natural springs. Wadi Al Arbeieen, for example, is blessed with a steady flow of water. Continuing with our road trip, we followed the valley downstream. Because of its water crossings and towering canyon walls, the trail was nothing short of spectacular. Back along the coast, we arrived at Bima sinkhole. This water-filled depression was formed when dissolving limestone caused the collapse of the surface layer. With the afternoon quickly turning to evening, we decided to put up our tent. As we watched the shadows lengthen, the gentle lapping of the waves was immensely peaceful. Early the next morning, we boarded a small boat that brought us across the mouth of Wadi Stab. Of all river valleys in Oman, this is one of the most exciting. A 2-kilometer-long hiking trail provides access to the many wonders of the gorge. However, it isn't the walking that sets this wadi apart.
Just another hiking trail in Oman. This one leads through quite a lot of water, so we have to actually swim. But it's a lot of fun, even though it's a bit exhausting.
On our journey into the canyon, we crossed several deep pools, as well as some shallow sections. The further we swam, the more the walls closed in. Eventually, nothing but a small crack remained. All those with an insatiable thirst for adventure can continue through this narrow gap. The reward for braving this dark passage is a hidden waterfall. Anyone with more courage than common sense can venture even further. Compared to the popular Wadi Stab, the nearby Wadi Tiwi is much less visited. The reason is its difficult accessibility, as it can only be reached on a narrow mountain road. Setting out from the village of Ibrahim, we walked down a series of stairs. What we then saw far exceeded our expectations. On one side, a raucous waterfall gushed down the rock face. On the other, a curtain of droplets fell into a sunlit pool. Tantalized by the glistening water, I couldn't resist climbing down. The view from below was simply outstanding. Accompanied by the sound of babbling water, I made my way from one pool to another, all the while savoring the serene atmosphere. The biggest challenge indeed was getting out again. Unlike the two previous gorges, Wadi Fins was entirely dry. However, that did in no way take away from its scenic appeal. Equally, the steeply rising Jebel al-Ḥajar are distinctly arid. This mountain chain is the highest on the Arabian Peninsula. Its name, which translates to Rocky Mountains, perfectly captures the rugged character of the landscape. In the past, crossing these mountains was a major challenge. Even today, the drive from the flat coastal plain is a thrilling adventure. Once we had made it to the top, we were greeted by a plateau, which is the birthplace of many wadis. After heavy rains, these river valleys are often ravaged by flash floods. But with no cloud in sight, it was safe to continue. Well, at least the weather posed no threat. Our further route, on the other hand, was rather daring. The drive to the mountain bowl of Kabir is certainly not for the faint of heart. Closely hugging a precipitous cliff, the narrow trail winds its way up and down a series of switchbacks. The main obstacle, however, was staying focused, as the scenery was utterly spellbinding. At last, we arrived at the end of the trail. In front of us, majestic cliffs rose sharply into the sky. Even more captivating was the wadi at their feet, though. Until just a few decades ago, locals used to practice subsistence farming on terraced fields. Today, these abandoned plots are a vivid reminder of a life fraught with hardship. Despite the seclusion, some people still live in this area. Most of the landscape, however, is virtually untouched. At some point, we came upon multiple tower-like structures. Scientists have dated them back to around 5,000 years ago. Surprisingly, these buildings never served any military purpose, as they are in fact tombs. Due to their robust dome-shaped structure, some of these so-called Beehive Tombs have withstood millennia of wind, rain, and even earthquakes. Fascinatingly, these burial chambers are not limited to a single location, but there are several sites around the country. left the mountains, we also visited Wadi Bani Auf. Oman's most popular natural swimming pool is fed by various springs which provide a constant supply of fresh water. In the early hours of the morning, this often lively place was still peacefully quiet. The next part of our road trip brought us back to the coast, which we then started to follow southwards. Along the way, we came upon quaint seaside towns, enjoyed the view of vast beaches, and looked out over a number of cliffs.
We have just left behind the tarmac and we are now driving on sand because we are making our way into the Wahiba Sands desert. And the first rule when driving on sand is to lower the tire pressure, because less air in the tire means a larger tire tread, and that in turn means more grip on the sand. Because if there is one thing that we do not want to happen, it is getting stuck somewhere in the desert, especially when the temperatures reach a scorching 40 degrees Celsius.
Rimal Wahiba is a sprawling sand desert that stretches 180 kilometers in length and roughly 80 kilometers in width. The biggest sand dunes can be found at its northern and southern edges. In contrast to that, large sections of the inner desert are surprisingly flat. So far, there is no official road through the desert, but over the years both Bedouins and travelers have left behind numerous trails. These tracks allow visitors to explore different parts of Wahiba, or to cross the entire desert from one side to the other. The traverse of Rimal Wahiba is not too difficult, as many trails are well trodden. But if you take only one wrong turn, you might quickly find yourself having to cross over a dune crest. Additionally, the elements constantly reshape the land. Thriving as a relentless sculptor, Aeolus, ruler of winds, ceaselessly moves grains of sand from one place to another. The result is an ever-changing scenery of unfathomable wonder. At the same time, shifting sands cover all trails, which means that picking the correct path is not always obvious. For that reason, anyone venturing here must carry a capable GPS. Saying all that, with good preparation and an appetite for adventure, crossing the Wahiba Sands will be a memorable experience. All those in the mood for sudden heart palpitations and intense perspiration can also hire a local guide. These know all the best places to go truly off-road. Together with our guide Saeed, we took on some of the highest ridges. Pinnacle of excitement was when we drove up the crest of a massive dune. Although our adrenaline levels were already perilously high, they rose even further upon realizing how we'd get back down. further highlight awaited us at the end of the day, when we set up camp in the heart of the desert. Surrounded by an ocean of sand, we watched as the slowly setting sun tinted the landscape in orange hues. The next morning we continued with our crossing. Soon after setting out, we came upon a mosque that has been built in the middle of nowhere. Its number of worshippers must be rather low, as we encountered less than 10 cars in 2 days. Nonetheless, there is life in Wahiba. The most common sight is the dromedary. These robust animals are perfectly adapted to even the most arid climate. They can withstand temperatures of over 50 degrees Celsius and require very little water. Also known as Arabian camels or one-humped camels, dromedaries play a fundamental role in Arab culture. For Bedouins living traditional lives, they remain an important source of meat, milk and wool. Additionally, they are a status symbol, particularly when they belong to the rare breed of black camels. One of their most characteristic features is their single hump. This bodily protrusion serves as a fat reserve for times when they find little food and water. Another adaptation to their environment is their dietary flexibility. They will not shy away from eating just about any vegetation, including dry and thorny desert plants. Seeing these animals thrive in even the most hostile landscape is a testament to their incredible resilience. Not far from the southern end of Wahiba, we came upon a glittering expanse. Interestingly, these shimmering salt flats are not only pretty to look at. Salt is actively harvested here, as could be seen by the many bags along the roadside. While driving on wet salt pans is a recipe for disaster, the main route across al-Hikman was perfectly safe. This 40-kilometer-long peninsula allows travelers to deeply immerse themselves in a lunar-esque landscape. While al-Hikman is mostly flat, the countryside further west is characterized by stunted trees and red rocks. Even more intriguing are the sugar dunes. This sea of pearly white sand radiates natural purity. Unlike in the Wahiba Sands, there are no established trails. Additionally, the sand is notoriously soft. We did, however, spot the remnants of some wind-blown tire tracks and decided to follow them as far as we could. we soon realized that we could go no further. A small herd of camels appeared in the distance. Demonstrating their superior dune crossing abilities, it almost felt as if they were taunting us. But with large snowshoe-like feet that distribute their weight, they were at a considerable advantage. Having concluded our dune exploration, we searched for a camp spot. Ironically, as soon as we had pitched the tent, the wind started to pick up dramatically. Looking around us, the entire dune field suddenly seemed in motion. Camping in between sand dunes is undoubtedly one of the most romantic ways to spend the night, but it can also be deeply uncomfortable, especially on a windy day, because the sand will creep into every single crevice, be it ears, nose, mouth, eyes, but of course also the entire tent. And for that very reason, we just abandoned our extremely beautiful camp spot in between the dunes and moved to a more open plain, in the hopes of not waking up feeling like battered chickens. Leaving the sugar dunes behind, we started our long drive to the southwestern corner of Oman. For the next 500 kilometers, the landscape was characterized by desolate nothingness. This only changed when we returned to the coast. This entire beach is covered in small sand mounds, and at first we were quite confused as to what they might be. We thought that perhaps nesting turtles had come ashore and dug a hole to lay their eggs, but that doesn't really make sense because turtles always lay their eggs above the high tide line. So there can only be one explanation for these, which is that crabs have dug holes, there's one coming out just now, dug deep burrows right here and left this entire beach covered in beautiful sand castles. Come out now. You're proving my point. Heading a few kilometers inland, we could scarcely believe our eyes. Ahead of us, steeply rising canyon walls promised a welcome change of scenery. Little did we know that the subsequent trail would be one of the most traumatic in Oman. At Wadi š-Šuwaimiyya, the element's steady craftsmanship has carved out a 25-kilometer-long valley. In the process, layer upon layer of Earth's history has been exposed. Differentiates this wadi from the surrounding countryside is the availability of water. Several springs are the lifeblood of a lush flora. The highlight, however, was the drive through the canyon. end of the trail, we decided to call it a day. Carrying on with our journey, the scenery did not disappoint either. In this part of the country, the ravages of time clearly left their mark. With unyielding tenacity, wind and water have chiseled monumental canyons. Elsewhere, these panoramas would be major tourist attractions, but here, far from any civilization, we had them all to ourselves. The same applied to the magnificent coastal road. Flanked by cliffs on one side and the open sea on the other, we called this the Great Ocean Road of Oman. When thinking about Oman, trees aren't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. So it is rather a surprise to come upon a veritable forest, especially a forest of baobab trees. Aside from Madagascar, Australia and Southern Africa, these trees are also native to Yemen and Oman, and with their massive tree trunks that can store huge amounts of water, they are perfectly adapted to this arid climate, which also allows them to weather even the longest drought. But as a matter of fact, these trees have chosen a good spot to put down their roots. The Dhofar Mountains in the southwest of the country rise up to 2,100 meters. Even though the landscape was dry at the time of our visit, only 1 month later everything would be green again. The reason for that imminent blossoming is al-Kharif. From June to September, this monsoon blesses the Dhofar with constant fine drizzle, breathing new life into the parched landscape. Aside from baobabs, the region is also famous for its frankincense trees. Visually, these plants aren't very striking, but their aromatic resin has brought wealth to Omanis for centuries. In addition to trees, the mountains are home to many other sights. However, the high humidity soon had us escape to the inland. Our next objective was to drive to the most remote corner of the country. Hugging the borders to Yemen and Saudi Arabia, al-Khali is the largest sand desert in the world. Also known as the Empty Quarter, this desert is no less than 1,000 kilometers long and 500 kilometers wide. The only way to explore this region is with excellent preparation, plenty of supplies and, of course, a reliable 4x4. In the past, this part of the Arabian Peninsula was almost impenetrable, but today gravel roads lead deep into the desert. One of these provides access to the country's highest sand dune. Needless to say, I could not resist the climb to its summit.
This climb is utterly brutal. It is just before 9 o'clock, but the sun is already burning down and we're getting close to 30 degrees Celsius and the sand is extremely soft, so I can only walk 10 to 15 meters before having to stop for another breather.
Luckily, the spectacular views gave me frequent excuses to pause.
The isolation of this place is simply magnificent. After driving hundreds of kilometers to the most remote corner of the country and then this truly arduous climb, I am now sitting on my sandy throne on top of the highest sand dune of Oman, and in front of me the beautiful desolation of the empty quarter opens up, and I cannot imagine a more beautiful place to be.
Standing at 455 meters, this mountain of sand towers above all others. Looking around me, I beheld a hyper-arid landscape that is as hostile to life as it gets. Of course, our visit to the empty quarter was not limited to its highest dune. Following a series of travel trails, we ventured deep into this sandy realm. In the evening, we set up camp among the dunes, mentally preparing for a daring expedition.
Before you consider crossing the empty quarter, you need to be aware that you need to be extremely well prepared. This means ample sand driving experience, a reliable vehicle carrying vast amounts of water. We are talking 80 to 100 liters here. A lot of food, of course, a detailed GPS route of the way you want to drive, as well as an emergency beacon, because this place is extremely remote and pretty much as far away from help as it gets.
Up to this point, we had mostly stayed on established tracks. But to cross the empty quarter, we need to leave this last vestige of civilization. Al-Khali is not a continuous dune field. In fact, quite the opposite is true. The terrain is an interesting blend of rising sands and flat gravel plains. At first, driving across these plains was comparatively easy. Nevertheless, route finding remained difficult, as the tire tracks of previous travelers led in every conceivable direction. That is why a detailed GPS is absolutely vital to avoid getting lost. The biggest challenge was yet to come though. Having crossed as far through the open plains as we could, we were now face to face with our first dune crossing. The golden rule for safely making it across is to always have one person scout the path ahead. Embracing that strategy, we slowly traversed one dune crest after another. But no matter how you look at it, venturing into this desert is extremely risky. Traveling alone means that there is no one to help you when things go wrong. That was a lesson we learned all too soon.
This comes as a real surprise now. For the last couple of hours we've been cruising over every sand dune and managed every type of sand in the process, but now, just before we wanted to set up camp, we drove over this little sand dune here and immediately got stuck. So apparently this particular sand is much softer, and now at 40 degrees Celsius we actually do have to dig ourselves out.
Two hours of digging and several failed attempts later, we finally made it out. To our great relief, the remaining stretch was much easier, allowing us to leave the empty quarter without further mishaps. With the sand dunes receding in our rearview mirror, we traveled 600 kilometers until reuniting with the Ḥajar mountains. After days of driving, a quiet morning with a hearty breakfast was just what we needed. At an elevation of around 2,000 meters, the Sayq Plateau is known for its year-round pleasant temperatures. Even at the height of summer, it is somewhat bearable up here. Today, most mountain villages are modern. However, there are also relics of the past. All across the plateau, abandoned dwellings provide a fascinating glimpse into Oman's history. Some of these buildings are very dilapidated, while others are in much better shape. Just below the plateau, the settlement of Wakan is an eagle's nest perched beneath a rock face. Similar to the villages further up, Wakan enjoys a fairly mild climate. This allows the locals to grow walnuts, apricots and pomegranates on terraced orchards. The centerpiece of the agricultural success is a fallage system. This irrigation technique has been used for millennia. Fed by a spring, dam or underground aqueduct, a series of gently sloping channels transports water to where it is most needed. These days, even the most remote village is connected to the outside world. Journeys that would have taken a week in the past can now be managed in a couple of hours. Nevertheless, many mountain roads remain challenging. The best example is the trek to Yasi. This steep road is notorious for its hairpin bends and narrow lane. Evoking a sense of apprehensive awe, parts of the journey lead below a mighty rock face. Rising hundreds of meters on one side and dropping down in equal measure on the other, there's no room for mistakes. Although our main reason to drive up here was the simple joy of doing it, we were just as delighted by the phenomenal views. To cross over to the southern side of the mountains, we followed the gravel road through Wadi Bani Auf. This river valley not only entices with an exciting drive, but also offers access to Bilad Seat. Due to its remote location and its well-tended fields, the village has developed into a popular tourist attraction. Much less visited are the ruins of Tanuf. This settlement was inhabited until the late 1950s. However, when the violent internal struggle between the Sultanate of Muscat and the Imamate of Oman reached its peak, the village was destroyed. Its ruins are a vivid reminder of the rapid changes Oman has undergone in merely half a century. Just behind the village, we came upon a herd of funny-looking goats. Similar to camels, these animals show remarkable resilience. Sticking to a narrow gravel path, we headed deep into Wadi Tanuf. Soaking in the jaw-dropping scenery, we could scarcely imagine a more impressive canyon. That is, until we entered Wadi Nakhr. Throughout the ages, a river has carved a deep gorge into the heart of the mountains. Massive cliffs rise up hundreds of meters from the valley floor. The sheer scale of this landscape is hard to grasp. It comes as no surprise then that this wadi has been nicknamed the Grand Canyon of Oman. At some point, the trail through the valley ended, but the adventure was far from over. Heading up the dry riverbed, I embarked on a somewhat challenging hike. But the hidden gem at the end of the track was more than worth the scrambling. Nestled in a secret cave, this sparkling pool offered the perfect opportunity to cool down. "1,000 meters above, the panorama was equally magnificent. In the distance, we could even make out the summit of Jebel Shams, Oman's highest mountain. Even better, our camp on the canyon rim provided us with an unobstructed view of the landscape. Aside from some cheeky goats, we had the entire place to ourselves. One of the most popular activities in the area is the balcony walk. Other than its canyon views, the trail provides access to an abandoned village. In the past, the settlement of Al-Sib was home to around 15 families. Their houses were built below a rock overhang, providing ample protection from the elements. Bidding farewell to the highest part of the country, we took a scenic gravel road to the west. Along its winding route, the trail mirrored the course of Wadi Damm. At first glance, this river valley seemed completely dry. But with just a little bit of effort, we discovered many enchanting rock pools. One of them was particularly lovely. Fed by the waters of a nearby spring, this pool was blessed with lush plant growth.
It is utterly incomprehensible to us how people can hike to such a beautiful place and then leave all their litter behind. And sadly, this is not just from tourists, but we've seen plenty of locals just carelessly throwing away trash. And the only thing we really can do is pick up whatever we can carry and leave the place cleaner for the next person.
Sadly, careless littering is not limited to this place. Pretty much everywhere around Oman, trash diminishes the natural beauty. Shockingly, it took us less than 10 minutes to collect several bags full of plastic bottles, food containers and every other type of garbage. The last leg of our journey brought us to Musandam, an exclave of Oman that is surrounded by the United Arab Emirates. Having completed all border crossings, Musandam welcomed us with its wonderful scenery. Historically, the area's main industry was fishing. In recent years, however, tourism has played an ever-increasing role. The reasons to come here are manifold, ranging from exhilarating mountain drives to the hunt for marine fossils. Those with keen eyes might also discover petroglyphs. The main tourist attraction is the jagged coastline though. Of course, the best way to experience it is on a dhow cruise. These traditional sailing ships are an important symbol of Oman's maritime history. Leaving the port behind, we followed the coast towards Elphinstone Inlet. Locally known as Horsham, this inlet is surrounded by staggering cliffs. In some places, the rock faces plummet more than 1,000 meters. If it weren't so incredibly hot, one could imagine that this landscape was sculpted by the frosty hand of glaciers. In fact, Musandam's nickname Norway of Arabia very much alludes to this. However, the similarity between the rugged seashore and the fjords of Scandinavia has completely different reasons. Due to the movements of the Earth's crust, Musandam, which lies at the tip of the Arabian plate, is gradually pushed under the Eurasian plate. So far, its mountains remain above water, but the valleys have not escaped the grip of the sea. Some sections of the inlet are fairly shallow and therefore perfectly suited for snorkeling. But our favorite experience was the encounter with Indian Ocean humpback dolphins. This particular species is easily recognizable by a fatty hump on their back. Similar to other dolphins, they are known to pursue boats, often performing remarkable acrobatics. Back on firm ground, we set out to explore the peninsula's mountains. Just like the coast, the interior of Musandam is marked by soaring peaks and deep dales. Standing out from the rest of the scenery is the mountain bowl of Al Ruwa. This large depression is encircled by seemingly impenetrable peaks. The contrast between its resilient flora and the inhospitable barrenness of the mountain flanks was deeply captivating. The final stretch of our road trip in Musandam brought us to Wadi Khabab al-Shamsi. Following a freshly graded trail, we were struck by the splendor of this dry river valley. Eventually, afternoon turned to evening. Neither rocks nor plants could escape the gentle touch of the sunset. Arm in arm on a rock, we marveled at the golden glow of the dying sun, reminiscing our incredible adventure. After 5 weeks and driving almost 8,000 kilometers, our road trip through Oman came to an end. From conquering precipitous dune crests to driving along dystopian off-road trails, this journey was a bonfire of adrenaline. But beneath the panoply of the stars, we also found serenity. The desert arouses our primal urge to explore, to wander, to drift with the wind. In the open landscapes of its desolate vastness, we can still hear the echo of our nomadic past. And so, it is only a matter of time until we will once again succumb to its bewitching whisper.